Hello and welcome to an introduction to LaTeX. So this is for people who have never used LaTeX before. If you have, you can check this section here for some more in-depth tutorial that I would recommend. But let's get started for people who have no idea what LaTeX is. So LaTeX is basically a form of markup. So things can have semantic meanings when you write a document. You can have sections, subsections, you can have lists of things, you can have tables of things, you can have images of things. And what LaTeX does is it allows you to structure all of that markup, and then you have a separate style sheet. That style file will then determine how that looks. So it means that you can take lots of different content and reuse it in lots of different places very easily. But it's also just a nice structured way of creating documents, creating words, and it is probably the most popular way of writing research papers. So let me show you what I mean. So this is the LaTeX form that I suggest you look into, and that's using Overleaf. So Overleaf is a LaTeX editor, and it's all available online, so you don't have to install anything on your machine, and it's collaborative. So you can think of this as the Google Docs equivalent for LaTeX. So you need to sign up for an account, but you can go and check out all of these kind of benefits. So I want to use it for writing. You can see, it has a web browser, I can share my files and so on. But let's go and have a look at plans and pricing. Now, you can get a free account. So there's a nice dark pattern here that suggests you need to sign up. But if you scroll down, you'll see that there's a free account there. The free account gives you a limit of collaborators per project, but that's not going to be an issue to begin with. And there are ways to add collaborators. Once you have an account, you can share the link for other people to sign up. That will give you collaborators as you kind of add recruits that way. But you can also get some student plans as well if you decide you can't wait for that and you really enjoy it. The best thing is that probably the people you're going to work with, you're not going to work with any more than one other person initially, or they will already have collaboration. And I am happy to set up documents for people and add multiple collaborators to those. So once you've got your free account, you can get that started. Let me just log in and show you what that looks like. So when you log in, you can see that I have a whole bunch of projects that have already been created. And you can see these in a big list. You can see that some of them have labels on them. So in some cases, I've created a folder here for current papers. This is for honours projects and so on. So if I go to my current papers option, I'm currently working on one thing right now, and I can then open that and have a look at what's within it. Now, if I go to create a new project, there are a number of different templates that exist. So you might decide that you want to use it to write something for a journal paper, for example. You might decide you want to do it to look at your CV. So I use mine to create my CV because it's nice and simple to keep updated. But I'm just going to start with an example project. And I'm going to call it example project and create that. So what we see in the editing section is we can see that there is a template that's already been created here. We can see that we have sections. So wherever you see like \section, that's what creates this numbered section here. We can have a title, which is here, author, date, and so on. So we have this far left panel, which is all of the files that are involved, and in some cases you'll see that there are multiple files. We'll go and look at a more complex example shortly. There's a menu, so if you figure out, you know what's going on, you can start to do things like change the compiler. You can start to add autocomplete, which affects what you can see in the right-hand window. You can add color themes, you can change the font size and so on. And you can also download your project. So if you have a LaTeX editor offline, you can download the entire source and go from there. The interesting part, you can also sync it with GitHub or Dropbox, so you can have a form of versioning control by doing that as well. So the middle section is where the bulk of that information happens. So I'm just going to change the title to show this is a title. And then every time you want to see that change happen in the right-hand page here, you just hit recompile. You can either use Command S on a Mac as well, which I assume is Control S on a Windows. So you can see that I have classes. That's called an article. That's the type of document that I've created, and I can change that if I want to do something a bit different. I've created a figure, it's got a caption, it's got a label, and I've got some references. So let's go ahead and look at something that is slightly more complicated. So I can go back up here using the up arrow to my project list, and I'm just going to go to all projects and pull out this template here. So this template is based on the ACM template, so there's a bit more complexity there. So let me just point out the key parts that you're going to need. So you will see if I go to the main file, because this is where all the information happens, you'll see that my document class has become much more complicated, right? So I have ACM art, that's an ACM article, so that's something that is defined within these ACM files, and you download those files as a separate thing. Now I can do things like, I've got review here, which is what's going to give me these numbers down the side, so that's really helpful when you're getting feedback. You can say, well, it's about line 50, this thing happens. And there's a whole bunch of information that again is related to the ACM, so the publisher is given this information. They need that information so that your document sits within the wider ecosystem that they've created. So what I've done here, just to make it a little easier to kind of understand where the different sections are coming from, is I've created a content folder, and in there are separate files for each of the subsections. And I've created a figures folder, and I have a figure in there. Now that's a PDF, so it's not going to give you a preview for that. So in my main section, I can do things like, if I just scroll down here, so this part here says give me input from another file. So I want to show you what happens if it goes wrong. So let me just delete that letter for a second and recompile. So you get this kind of a bit intimidating looking thing saying there's an error. But if we just follow that LaTeX error that comes up, this isn't found. If I click it, it will take me directly to the line. There'll be a kind of red X there to point out this is the big problem you have, and it's just because I have a spelling mistake. So typically it will be things like you have a spelling mistake, you opened a list but you didn't close a list, that sort of thing. So let's use this introduction section to give you a sense of how different things work. So in the introduction section, I have a section, so that's going to give me this top level, and I have a subsection, which is going to start numbering. Now I can, if I want to, add a subsection. Test sub, and put some text in there, and you'll see that we now end up with 1.1.1 test sub. There we go, so that has now appeared down just above my related work section. I can make some text bold. The command for that is \BF. I use curly brackets to open something, and then I use curly brackets to close it. And what that means is everything that's inside these curly brackets is affected by this command that comes in front of it. So in this case, it's going to make that entire sentence bold, which of course it has. So you can find a whole bunch of information if you go to overleaf.com and you go to help and documentation. This is going to give you everything that you need to be able to do. So if you want to know about paragraphs, bold, italics, underline, making lists, what the errors mean, and so on, the key thing for you to pay attention to in terms of kind of what's the most complicated, the first of those is tables. So there's a whole bunch of information here on how to create a table. So you can follow that information, or what I suggest you do is you Google LaTeX table generator and click on the first one, which will be tablegenerator.com, and from there you can basically create a table using something that's perhaps a bit more familiar, you know, add a row, add a column, make this bit bold, and all you do is you copy that section. From there, there's a copy to clipboard button as well. We're going to pop that right in our table here, in our document, recompile, and you should see then that table appears. There we go. So, interesting thing happened there. That table did not appear exactly under section 1.1.1, which we thought it would, perhaps. And the reason is that there's some intelligence built in here. What's going to happen is that LaTeX will place tables and figures in a way that avoids white space within a document and tends to pop them kind of at the top of columns just for readability, makes it a bit easier to see what's going on. Okay, the second of those things that I said would be slightly more complicated are references. So references uses a .bib file, and in this case we've got references.bib, and each one of these is a reference. So you can see some information if you go to Bibliography Management with BibTeX. You can see that it gives you some information on what a BibTeX item might be, the different styles of bibliography that you can get. So you can create a style file, or you can use something that was already there. So what we have in this template is, if I go to my main document, you see I'm pulling in bibliography style, which is ACM reference format. That correlates to my file set there. And my bibliography is created from my reference file. So you can play around with each of these different things. Feel free to use any and all help from Overleaf that is available. You're not going to break it. If you break it, you can just undo and fix it again. So try and play around with different options that are available, different settings, and start by building a document from a template. Start with something. Don't start with it being empty. If you start with it being empty, then it's kind of a bit more difficult for you to become. If you start with something that's empty, then you're just looking into a void. Start with something that's got a template and you can build from it. I want to make this bold, I want to add a table, how do I do that? So that should have given you an overview of LaTeX. Please go away, play with it. I recommend Overleaf as the kind of tool of choice for you to do that. But hopefully it will give you a nice simple way to structure documents and create documents in the future.